Good evening, everyone. It is January the 13th and time to begin our 4 o'clock afternoon meeting. At this time, we'll call ourselves to order, and I will call the roll. And please speak up, and please identify yourself at each time that you speak or make a motion. Please remember that, and I will try to remember it also on my end. So at this time, I'll take the roll call. Councilmember Anthony,
Councilwoman Anthony here.
Councilman Gordon, here. Councilman Holloway, Councilman Holloway, Mayor Kilgore, here. Councilman McGee,
Here.
and Councilman Lynn. Okay, Councilman James.
Here.
Okay, I call for Councilman Holloway, Mayor Pro Tem Councilman Holloway. Are you on? So
Mayor, this is Majib Shakana. I would note that it looks like Councilmember Kazai is on, although he is muted.
Yeah.
So you may want to ask him to unmute himself and note that he is present.
Mayor, this is Pete Ovanik. Marion Holloway, Councilman Holloway, Mayor Pro Tem Holloway is in the process of trying to get connected.
Okay.
Can you hear me,
Councilman-
Bobby?
Yes, sir. I hear you now, Lynn.
Okay, I'm here.
Okay, got you. We're waiting on, we'll continue with our meeting, and Mayor Pro Tem Mayor Pro Tem Holloway can join us as he comes on. At this time, we'll go to item 1, presentation by Union County Tax Administrator regarding 2021 countywide evaluation. And I'll ask Mr. Van Harrell at this time if he's on.
Yes, sir. I'm right here. How are
Thank
you?
you, Mr. Harrell. Okay, sir, you're on, sir.
Appreciate you having me this afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Council. We've got a lot of work being done right now, and we're trying to get this information out to all the different municipalities in the county and various other organizations that we've been speaking to. I'll try to make this as quick and painless as possible. Taxes are very exciting, as everybody knows, especially Councilwoman James, with her background in accounting. This is important information. We want to get this out there for you all, so that every jurisdiction, at least at this point, is operating from the same set of information and standpoint with regards to this reappraisal process. And try to share my screen. Bruce, is that coming through?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay. So like I said, my name is Van Harrell. I'm Union County Tax Administrator. I've been with Union County now for almost 17 years. I've got some of my leadership team that's involved in this process with us today. Phil Every, who's been with the county roughly 22 years. He's our appraisal director. And Robin Mary is our assessment division director. She's primarily involved in tax relief, personal property, and land records GIS information. And Phil oversees the appraisal of all commercial and residential property in the county. So just a bit on our guiding principles, rules and policies, so how we go about this process, and really our daily interactions with the taxpayers throughout the county. Number one, we strive to be fair and equitable to everyone. We want to make sure every taxpayer is treated the same, regardless of what part of the county they're from, or how much their tax bill is, or how small their tax bill is. We try to operate our office under general statutes and industry best practices, treating everyone equitably throughout Union County. So the topic at hand is the countywide reappraisal, and we're just trying to share this information. What is this process, and why are we doing it? So, in a nutshell, this is just a systematic review and appraisal of all real property in Union County. We do this process periodically to be in compliance with state statutes and existing case law surrounding the reappraisal process. The primary purposes for this process is to reestablish equity and fairness in the property tax base, ensure our statutory mandate is to ensure that assessed values are reflective of the current real estate market at the time of a reappraisal. And then there's some property classes that are afforded the equalization reductions in their taxes based on the sales ratio. And we're going to talk about a lot of different data today and terminology, and I'll do my best to explain those. As we go through this, if you have any questions during or after, I'll be glad to answer those if you need clarification. So we've gotten a lot of questions about the timing of this. Why are we doing it now in the middle of a pandemic when a lot of people are struggling financially? Unemployment's up a little bit compared to what it has been the last several years. North Carolina general statute dictates that this process occurs on one of three time frames. The maximum time period between reappraisals is 8 years. Our values are currently operating under were set in 2015, which is our last reappraisal. So if we were on the 8-year cycle, our next reappraisal would be 2023. There's some reasons that we're not on the 8-year cycle, and we'll go into those in a moment. If you skip down to the third point here, the second option that for a reappraisal is the board of county commissioners can opt to advance that to a more frequent cycle. For those of you that have been around a while, we did 4-year reappraisals in 2004 and 2008. It was a time of very rapid growth in the county. And the market was moving very quickly, and to meet our statutory guidelines, the county opted to do those on 4-year cycles. As we know, after 2008, the recession hit. We did not do a reappraisal in 2012. That would have had significant implications from a tax-based standpoint, so the board opted not to do that. Shortly after what would have been the deadline for that reappraisal, we kicked in with the second point here on the slide, which is a mandatory advancement of the reappraisal based on population size and the sales assessment ratio. And that is where we are again today. The sales assessment ratio is a comparison. It's a study that's performed by the Department of Revenue where they compare our current assessed values with current real estate sales in the market. And if we are plus or minus a certain percentage, as we'll go into on the next slide, of that market number, then we trigger a reappraisal within 3 years, which we received that notice in 2018, dictating that we had to do a reappraisal by January 1 of 2021, or with an effective date of January 1, 2021. The second criteria for that to trigger that mandatory advancement is population size. So if a county has a population greater than 75,000, they qualify under the statute if they meet the sales ratio qualification. That percentage that the Department of Revenue looks at is if we are plus or minus 15% of more than 15% of market, meaning at 115 or less than 85%, then we have to do the reappraisal. In 2018, I believe it was March of 2018, we got that notice from the state. Our sales ratio was 84.5%. Since that time, in just a little under 3 years, that sales ratio has continued to decline, meaning the market is growing faster. To currently, we're sitting between 69 and 70% on our sales ratio, which is roughly 31% under market. So just to briefly touch on our timeline, this is not a process that happens overnight. We've been working on this project for 2 years. Starting back in late 2018, we had to submit our reappraisal plan to the Department of Revenue. In October of 2020, we took our proposed schedule of values, presented that to the board, and they held a public hearing on November 2nd, and then adopted that schedule of values on November 16th of 2020. I'll go into some detail about what the schedule of values is and what that means to the process. Just a few slides. On January 1st became the effective date of the reappraisal. We're still finalizing values. Our intent is to send the notices out around the end of February from the standpoint of notifying individual property owners. Sometime subsequent to that or shortly after that, we'll begin to discuss with your finance office and tax collector regarding our tax base estimates. Around mid-February, we're planning to go to the Board of County Commissioners with some information related to new values and summary information anyway, just showing what the county looks like as a whole before and after. And so we'll be able to provide that information as well to the municipalities at the appropriate time. Once the notices are mailed in February, that opens an appeal period. Taxpayers can appeal. There's multiple avenues of appealing their property value if they disagree with that. We anticipate that appeal window closing around the end of May. That gives taxpayers roughly 90 to 120 days there to file their appeal with our office. Just to, again, briefly touching here on the reappraisal plan, we had to look at budget, staffing, outsourcing needs, any software compliance issues, and developing our overall timeline. All of these components were looked at in deference to Department of Revenue guidelines, the International Association of Assessing Officers, of which we are a member, their guidelines, and North Carolina general statutes, most importantly. So what is a uniform schedule of values? You heard me mention that just a couple of minutes ago. A schedule of values is really, we look at it as the recipe list and the cookbook sort of to determine the property for a given, determine the value for a given property anywhere in the county. It's based on neighborhoods, appraisal neighborhoods, cost, sales data from those neighborhoods, and we build the overall values based on that data. It establishes the rates and procedures that stay in effect for the entire next reappraisal cycle. So when we pull the trigger on this, effective January 1st of this year, and those values are set, those values stay in effect until we have another reappraisal, whether it be 4 years or 8 years down the road. Again, in a county like Union County, if it continues to grow and the market continues to stay healthy, as it is now, I would anticipate another reappraisal within 4 to 6 years, potentially. The data, we use qualified sales, meaning they're not family member to family member. There's no undue influence in impacting the sale. And over the last 5 years, we've had 34,000 qualified sales occur in Union County. We use that sales data and regional construction cost indexes to determine our valuation methodologies. The purpose of the reappraisal is to capture the current real estate market. It is not prospective in nature from the standpoint, we're not trying to tell people this is where we think your house is going to be worth down the road. We are actually setting the value in retrospection, looking at what has occurred since 2015. As far as our methodology is concerned, this is a mass appraisal process compared to fee appraisal, where an appraiser may go inspect a property, find 2 other properties that are similar, maybe 3 other properties that are similar, and determine the value for that house. We look at this from a global perspective. We have many appraisal neighborhoods, as you'll see in a moment, throughout Union County. We use the same approaches to value that a fee appraiser would. It's just applied on from a statistical analysis standpoint to a broader area. We use 3 approaches to value, being sales, cost, and income. As far as land valuation, sales typically determine that. When there are no sales, we use processes such as allocation and abstraction, which is essentially just allocating a portion of, if a property sells and there's no land in that area that has sold, we'll allocate a percentage of that sale price to the land value. And typically that is 15 to 20%, most often closer to 20. The things that affect land values are the appraisal neighborhoods, influence factors on the lot, whether it has road frontage, whether it's landlocked, whether it will pass a perk test, and things of that nature, and also site ratings. When it comes to valuing our improvements and the buildings on the property, we look at replacement cost new, and that is adjusted for depreciation and location as well. Part of this process is an ongoing quality assurance review program. Our goal is to, at some point, visit every property in Union County. It's hard. We have 8.5 full-time appraisers that are in the field. So it's a challenge to cover 105,000 parcels with that number of appraisers, and it's impossible to do it every year. So this is an ongoing process where we review segments of the county throughout over time. And currently, as of September, October timeframe, we've inspected and visited, whether it be through aerial imagery or actually visiting the property when possible, just under 64,000 properties throughout the county. You heard me talk about appraisal neighborhoods. This is a process called neighborhood delineation, and this is a critical component to our processes here in the office. It was first used in Union County in the 1980s. And what this does, it divides the county into smaller geographical units so that we can group like properties together to make sure they're assessed equitably and look at markets individually as opposed to the county as a whole. So what this prevents from happening is a house that may be on the Union-Anson County line that's a brick house with an acre of land is not going to be valued the same as a brick house with an acre of land on the Union-Mecklenburg line, because that's two distinct different areas in the county. The base level, we have roughly 900 appraisal neighborhoods in the county, and typically on average there's about 115 parcels per appraisal neighborhood. And when we talk about the neighborhood, we're not talking about a subdivision. We're talking an area, a geographic area. You may have a subdivision, and what one I can think of that's the biggest is Brandon Oaks and Indian Trail. They may have 5 to 7 appraisal neighborhoods within that subdivision, or you may have a single subdivision that's its own appraisal neighborhood. So it varies depending on the type of homes that are in the area, the quality of construction, and those type of things. The base level of grouping, from an appraisal standpoint, we look for one common element that all properties in a given area have in common. And we start, our base level there is the high school district for that area. This is just a map that's a representation of the appraisal neighborhoods throughout the county. If you look, the easiest way to kind of explain this, if you look down the 601 corridor here, you see that's pretty standard one color. There may be some other colors mixed into that blend there, but you would typically look at that area as an appraisal neighborhood because everything is somewhat homogeneous. There's a lot of farmland there. You may have some homes with large tracts of land. So that area would be considered a neighborhood. If you go over toward Wesley Chapel, Weddington, Indian Trail, Stallings, you see a lot of patches of gray over here around Highway 84 between there and 74. That's because there's so many neighborhoods in there. If we were able to zoom that in, you would start to see the different colors pop out, indicating a different appraisal neighborhood. But that just kind of tells you how we go about it. This is a global picture of those 900 appraisal neighborhoods around the county. One of the big things that we look at is equity in our assessments, and we touched on that being one of our driving core principles here in the office. There are 4 categories of property that are assessed both by the municipalities and the county, and those are motor vehicles, public service companies, personal property, and real estate. 3 of those are assessed annually, and that is personal property, public service companies, and motor vehicles. Your public service companies are companies such as Union Power, Duke Energy, CSX Railroad. Those types of properties are assessed by the state, and we're provided a lump sum value. We are not involved in the valuation of those companies at all. But when you look at the sales ratio, those companies are provided a tax break, if you will, by law, once that sales ratio that we've talked about hits a certain threshold. So you can see here on the real estate line, going back to 2015, after that reappraisal, we were at 99.71% of market. Fast forward to 2020, and this number here is from September. It was 73%. Today it's between 69 and 70. I just have not updated that spot on the slide. Personal property is assessed annually, so it's always taxed at 100% minus the depreciation. And the motor vehicles are the same way. This public service component here, once the state determines that your sales ratio has dropped below 90%, and when they send you notification, the valuation that you can tax those public service companies on drops. It goes from 100% to whatever number the state tells you. For us and everybody else in Union County that has these type of properties, of which Monroe has a fair amount, is 83%. So their value, and that's on the next slide, but or a couple of slides down, but the valuation here, for example, for 2020, the total valuation for Union County for public service companies was $479 million, but we can only tax them on 83% of that. So the impact of that to the county was a loss of $600,000 in tax revenue because we lost a significant amount of that value due to the sales ratio and the equalization effect. So here's a question that everybody has when we've been doing these meetings. I think this is my fourth one this week. I've got another one Friday. What's the impact? How's it going to impact our bottom line from a property owner perspective, and for you from a budgetary perspective for the city of Monroe? Virtually every property in the county is going to see an increase. We know that. We're not seeing any areas where there's any decline in value. Overall, the impact, the full impact of that is not known yet because we're still finalizing the values. But our current valuation year is 2015, and that's driving that. We're 6 years past the last reappraisal in a very hot real estate market. We've all heard stories of people putting their house on the market and having a contract on it in 24 hours or less. The 2015 reappraisal on top of that was a contraction in the tax base. So our last reappraisal prior to that was 2008. We endured the recession and a significant decline in property values. By the time 2015 came along, we had not fully recovered the tax base that we lost after 2008. So that was a 10% contraction. Countywide, and this number is kind of trending the same for the municipalities as a whole, we're anticipating residential commercial properties globally to increase around 30%. And that's looking at the total valuation bucket. Obviously, property to property, that's going to be different. I looked at one earlier today in it's not in Monroe, it's in a different part of the county. It went up 77%. I live right on the outskirts of Monroe by the airport. My property is going up 49%. I also know some that are going up 20%. So it's going to vary from property to property. But overall, globally, we expect about a 30% increase in the tax base. We expect rural land to follow that same trend. As we know with that, there's some, if it's a large tract and it's being farmed, it's handled through some tax relief programs that we'll touch on in a moment. The big thing here that we'd like to especially from a jurisdiction standpoint, every jurisdiction has to publish a revenue neutral tax rate. And that does not mean it's revenue neutral for a property owner. It means the city or the county will not generate, what's the tax rate that would generate the same amount of revenue that we had last year based on the new values. A good way to look at this is if there's a 30% increase, theoretically, if a individual property owner, if their property goes up 30%, they'll pay the same amount of money roughly. If their property goes up 20%, then they would pay typically less money if the revenue neutral rate is set truly at revenue neutral. If somebody in my situation where it's going to go up 49% and there's a revenue neutral rate that's put in effect, I'm actually going to pay more because my house went up more than the overall increase. A component of this process is the present use value program. It's a tax relief program that allows land that's being used for ag, horticulture, or forestry purposes to be taxed at a lower per acre rate than the market value. And this is a tax break for those that are in the farming and wood forestry growth business that actually is a major benefit for them. And with Union County as a whole, it's a huge benefit. We have 46% of our acreage in Union County in the present use value program. And I'll show you there are ownership and income requirements that are required to be met here. But the rates that they are charged per acre are changing this year as well. We do not set those rates here locally. They are set by the North Carolina Use Value Advisory Board. We do not have the expertise in-house at the moment to go through what would be a study of those type of properties to determine the types of rents they're drawing to capitalize those to be able to set those rates ourselves. So just briefly to touch on this, because there's very little agricultural land within the city of Monroe, but we just look at the agricultural piece predominantly because that's our largest one in the present use value program. The rate per acre in 2015 was $385. That rate is going up to $420 per acre, which is about a 9% change in the tax rate. Just as an example of the impact this is for a farmer that may have 50 acres, we looked at the area down 601 headed towards South Carolina. If you have a 50-acre tract in that area based on the 2015 values, they would have been taxed at $19,250 for that whole tract, as opposed to whatever the market value would be. With the new rate per acre that's going into effect this year, that tax value would be $21,000, which results in an increase in taxes of $12 for that particular piece of property. Ultimately, though, it's a 90% tax deferment. And I say deferment as opposed to exemption, because if they sell that piece of property, whatever jurisdictions tax that piece of property get a rollback of the last 3 years of taxes, meaning they have to go back and pay those previous 3 years along with the interest at the time of the sale. So if a taxpayer does not agree with their value, what can they do? There's a 5-stage appeals process that is available in every county in North Carolina. The first stage, once we send that letter, they call and they say, listen, there's no way my house is worth this much. We will ask them for documentation. We have an online appeals portal that will be available when the time is right. We hope to have that launched here in the next 2 to 3 weeks. This is the informal review process. They will contact their office. The appraiser will work with that taxpayer to come up to an agreed upon value. And at that point, the matter is settled. Probably 95% of our appeals are settled at that level. And we anticipate that again this year, if history holds true. If we can't settle with the taxpayer at that point, they're allowed to appeal to the Board of Equalization and Review. That is a board the members of that board are appointed by the Board of County Commissioners, and all of our current board members have served multiple terms on the Board of Equalization and Review. So they're very knowledgeable and very well versed in this process. If the taxpayer disagrees with the board's decision, they have the right to appeal to the Property Tax Commission. It's important to note that taxpayers do not need legal representation either at the Board of Equalization and Review or the Property Tax Commission. They can represent themselves or have someone other than an attorney or such as an accountant represent them in that hearing. Beyond that, the Property Tax Commission is the final arbiter of value. If we can't come up with an agreed upon amount, the board can't. Once it goes to the Property Tax Commission and they set that value, that is the final say in that matter from a value standpoint. If the appeal to the commission is related to a legal argument, whether it's procedural or just an interpretation of the law, beyond that, the party that lost at the commission has a right to appeal to the Court of Appeals, and then in certain circumstances on to the Supreme Court. But obviously at both of those, you have to have legal representation. Just to touch briefly here on our tax relief programs, this has been a topic of discussion at most of our meetings. Our biggest program for taxpayers is the elderly disabled exclusion, which excludes 25,000 or 50% of the taxable value up to 1 acre of land. So if you have that up to 1 acre is important. If you have multiple acres, so if you have a property that's 10 acres and you have a house on it and you qualify for this program, that 9 acres is still going to be taxed at market value. The 1 acre in the house, we would be able to exclude upon qualification again, up to 50% of that taxable value. The property must be deeded to the owner. They must be a resident, and the age requirement is 65 years of age, and there's an income requirement currently of $31,500. If you exceed that income, there is another program available, but it's not as lucrative. The Department of Revenue adjusts the income level each year based on the cost of living with Social Security adjustments. We also have a disabled veteran exclusion that for qualified owners, they receive an exclusion of $45,000. The circuit breaker program is the piggyback onto the elderly and disabled exclusion program. If you don't meet the 31,000 income threshold, you're allowed second sort of deferment. This is another deferment. It's not an exclusion, but the income level would be $47,500 for this year. We've already touched on present use value. And then obviously we have tax exemption programs for charitable, religious, educational, and governmental properties. Again, ownership and use requirements must be met for all of these programs. Another question we've been asked is, how are you getting this information out? Because this is important. It's a tough time. People are struggling. Well, we're doing everything we can. This is, like I said earlier, this is my fourth meeting out of 5 this week, third one today. We've done several starting back in December. We've got a lot scheduled from now to the middle of February. And so we're doing everything we can do to get the word out in person or virtually, whichever the case may be. We're utilizing local media outlets. The Inquirer Journal we did an interview with them a few weeks ago, also an interview on Wixie Radio. The county is pushing information out via social media platforms. We have set up a dedicated 2021 reappraisal webpage. There's a lot of information available there. I would encourage you to provide a link to that page from the city's website if you so desire. There is a good informational video that was put out, I guess about a month ago at this point. It's about a 3-minute video that is the county manager and myself and Robin and Phil that we went out and just kind of walked people through the process and explained what we were doing. And we also engage with civic, community, and faith-based groups as requested. There is a speaker request form available on our website on the reappraisal webpage. So if you know any group that's looking that would benefit from having this information presented, please let us know. We want to get it out as much as possible. Just to provide you a quick look at the county tax base for 2020 to show you where we're at and where we think we're headed. The real estate value, the overall real property value for 2020 in Union County was $25.6 billion. We lose about, if you look at our total tax base, we lose about 10% of our tax base to tax relief programs, whether it's PUV, the present use value program, or the senior citizens disabled exemption programs. Our total estimated tax base for 2020 was $27.8 billion for the county, which represents an annual growth rate over 19 of 3.14%. From regards to that growth rate, we have consistently seen since 2014, 2015, in new construction, new value, new property, about a 3% growth rate annually. So it's a consistent, we're not seeing the big peaks that we saw in the early 2000s, but it's a consistent growth pattern throughout the county. You'll see that indicated here again in a moment. Here's an overall snapshot of the county's tax base. When looking at the total base, we're 73% residential, 10% commercial industrial, another 10% for motor vehicles, and then 6% for individual and business personal property, and 1% for the public service companies. If you break this down just to real estate only, we're roughly 87, 88% residential throughout the county. Some additional statistics here. We talked about the consistent growth pattern. This goes back to 2013, actually. Our average parcel growth per year, which means new properties, new lots that are being started, is about 1,700 new parcels per year. From a residential standpoint, all those parcels are not used every year, so obviously the average carries forward. Number of homes being started per year since 2014 is just under 1,800. The sales volume that we talked about that we use to review and prepare for this reappraisal process, we're averaging about 6,300 residential sales per year. That's a significant volume for a county the size of Union County. Our commercial growth is nowhere near that amount. We're about 60 parcels per year, 60 different projects per year. And then the next few slides will show you the sales ratio history for the last several revals, and you can kind of see where we've been historically and where we're at now. And we're almost done, I promise. This slide here goes back to 1986. We talk about a 31% increase in property values overall. That's not unheard of in Union County. If you go back to the 1991 reappraisal, 1992 reappraisal, we had a 40% increase in the market in that time frame. Come forward to the year 2000, there was another 29% increase in the market. At that point, the county went to 4-year reappraisals. So you can see, and I missed this one here, but we had 87 to 90, so roughly a 9% increase in 2004, and then another 15, 16% increase in 2008. You heard me talk about the trigger mechanisms in the statute. The first time that ever occurred in North Carolina, actually the only 2 times that has ever occurred in North Carolina is in Union County. In 2012, we hit 119% of market. That's when things really went south with the recession. Fast forward to 2018 here on the end, you see that we dropped below 85% and went to 84% of market. And this next slide is a continuation of that line, just kind of zooms in more to today. It includes the rest of the line here. So you can see right now in 2020, we're at 70%. So in conclusion, again, our 3 guiding principles are transparency, equity, and fairness. Everything we do is open to the public. The schedule of values is available online. We are willing to sit down with anyone and talk through our processes. We're not trying to hide anything. So we want to make sure everybody understands that, and they can contact our office for any information. Our staff is very customer friendly, and people may not always like the answer they get, but the answer is going to be in accordance with general statutes and handled in an appropriate manner. And again, equity and fairness is critical to our operations. We believe in a customer-focused process, especially with this appeals process. If somebody gets some notice and they say, "There's no way my property's worth this. You've got this wrong on my property," let us know. Let us fix it. Help us help you to make sure you have the most fair assessment possible. Again, we're building on our public information campaign, doing many meetings like we're doing today. And then we're utilizing technology to make things as accessible as possible with the website, and putting our appeals module online and allowing people to submit things electronically to us. With that, I am done. I'm happy to take any questions. I know it's a lot of information covered in a short amount of time, but we feel like we need to get this out there and make everybody aware and have things on an equal footing across the county through all the municipalities.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harrell. Would the county, would any council have a question for Mr. Harrell
Yes.
with the county?
Yes, I do, Bobby. Van, thank you for your presentation. I have 2 questions. This is Councilwoman Salute Anthony. During the appeals process, as they go through the different protocols, will they be incurring interest on the original evaluation?
That depends on how long the appeal goes. So the tax bills will actually not be sent out until August, September timeframe of later this year.
Mm-hmm.
Our goal, we know there'll be some appeals that go beyond that timeframe, but if the typical taxpayer were to appeal in April, that valuation should be settled by the time they get their tax bill. And so their bill would actually reflect whatever the agreed upon value was during their appeal process. Having said that, if they do not agree and nothing can be settled and it goes to the Property Tax Commission, often those hearings are scheduled later down the road. So just to give you an example, we've got one appeal that's been in process that I know some of the folks with the city are familiar with. It's been in process since 2017. It's sitting at the Supreme Court right now. So one of 2 things is going to happen. They've paid their bill. If we lose, then we owe them interest. If they lose and they've got to pay us, well, they've already paid us. So at that point, there's no issue for them. But the way it works in that appeals process, if you go to the Property Tax Commission, the way the state statute is stated, pay taxes based on the amount that you think you owe, leave the remainder unpaid, and that draws interest until the decision is made. You can pay all the tax, and if you are victorious as a taxpayer in your appeal, then the county owes you the difference in a refund plus a statutory amount of interest. So it depends on which way it goes.
Okay. And my second question, with the senior tax relief for people 65 and older or permanently disabled, the deed has to be in that person's name. My question is, if it is an heir property and the person's name is on the deed, but it's not the only name on the deed, would that disqualify them for a reduction in their tax?
We would have to look at that closely, because there are some stipulations on that. Yes, ma'am. It is highly possible if it's an heir property, and there is, let's say there's 10 heirs that own that piece of property. More than likely, that property is not going to qualify. But we would be willing to look at that very closely for the person in question. But there is an application process. So we encourage people to apply if possible by January 31st, regardless of what their value this year is going to be, because they already own the property's already there. But that's not a hard deadline, but we would encourage people to get them in as early as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you again, Mr. Harrell. Does anyone else have a question? Mayor Kilgore. Hearing none, we'll go to item 2. And again, Mr. Harrell, thank you so much for bringing information to us.
All right, thank you for having us.
Item 2, City Council compensation review. I'll recognize Ms. Deborah Reed at this time.
Okay, good afternoon, Council, Mayor. This is Deborah Chestnut Reed, Director of Human Resources for the city. City Council is requested to review options for a possible modification to the mayor and the council's compensation. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure. At the request of council, staff was requested to review mayor and council compensation to provide options for the mayor and the council to consider for possible compensation modifications. Compensation for the mayor and the council, we looked at 4 peer communities, Albemarle, Concord, Kannapolis, and Salisbury. We looked at the history of Monroe City Council's pay adjustment between July 2006 to November 2019. And also there is going to be a recommendation for the North Carolina General Statute authorizing how council's pay is adjusted and some of the wording in our policy. After determining an average compensation amount for the peer communities, staff noted that the average compensation in the peer communities was above the current compensation amount for the mayor and the council. The information was provided to Council Member Gordon, who had been tasked by the council with examining the review. Following a discussion between staff and Council Member Gordon, staff prepared 4 options for consideration at this particular meeting. Council can have no changes to mayor and council compensation, or lump sum modification to bring compensation to the average of the peer community, or lump sum modification with future increases in line with the average employee compensation increase, or indexing mayor and council compensation based on the federally determined median family income for the region. If council were to decide to make any changes to compensation, changes could only be effective as specified in the city's budget, meaning that the earliest effective date would be July 1st, 2021. Council is requested to review the attached information and instruct staff on if any future action is needed during the budget process. And looking at the attachments, the first attachment is the survey that we do for City Council. It has been continued to complete an annual survey in April for mayor, mayor pro tem, and council. Out of 17 municipalities, we identified 4 that Council Member Gordon was interested in learning the steps used in increasing council salary. The question was asked of each peer group was how does council pay, how is it determined within your municipality? And speaking with Albemarle, their council voted to use the cost of living. Concord, they vote for the cost of living. Kannapolis vote for a salary tied to the increases that the city employees get. And Salisbury, they vote for cost of living, and sometimes their vote is for a flat fee. The insight that stemmed from the survey that you see in front of you demonstrates that the city of Monroe's council salary is lagging behind other municipalities of like size. Now, if you go to the second screen, which is the mayor, mayor pro tem and council's proposed salary, the positions that we have also have equity between the mayor, mayor pro tem, and mayor pro tem and council. So you see the current annual salary there. And then you see the percentage of increase, meaning that this is how far the lag was in terms of the mayor was 45.10% behind the peer groups. The mayor pro tem was 69.28%, and council was 69.28%. The proposed new salaries as listed here with those increases would be $14,572.67 for mayor, mayor pro tem 13,099.15, and then 12,000 for council. For the annualized budget increase, that total would come to $34,813.82 if requested during the budget process. Then you had another alternative, which is the median family income, the MFI, which is the next screen. Oh, nope, go back one more. Go back one more. Go back again, right there. Okay, so this is prepared by the U.S. Census Bureau. If included as part of a policy, setting council pay as a factor of an index will allow pay to self-adjust with changes in the index in the case of the MFI. If the MFI shrinks, there should not be a corresponding adjustment reducing the council's pay unless a reduction in pay is made generally for all employees. For example, if there was a rift or a furlough, any reduction that had to do with the economic cycles. Adjustment in council pay should not be at a rate or percentage greater than an increase that's provided for the general employees. And if you look at the actual scale, it starts at 2020, 2021, and 2022. 2021 and 22 are hypothetical, which offered an illustration to show if council was to move to the 12,000, which it shows here 15%, it actually gave an illustration for 2021 of how those increases based on what percent is selected by council for this particular option. Also going to the history of trying to find out where our council was. If you go to the next slide, Bruce, the history started with 2006. We went back to 2006. There was a cost of living, and these are all July, which we followed the statute in terms of making sure that it was with the budget. There was a 2% COLA that was voted in by council. 2007, council got 2% COLA. 2008, council got 2.5% along with all the other employees. 2009, 10, 11, up to 12, there was no increase. When we got to 2012, there was a 3.9% increase. And going on to 13, 14, and 15, there was no increase for council or the management team, but the employees actually got a cost of living of 3%. And the other consideration in this process, if you look at the general statute, Bruce, go down one. Section 7, it talks about the wages, and staff is recommending that this statement be changed to more reflect the general statute of Section 7, policy GA 15. Bruce, go to the next slide down. The recommendation to revise this, it states that under the North Carolina General Statute, Section 160A-64, council's wages may be increased only during the annual budget process through the adoption of the annual budget ordinance. The date of an effective increase may be set as a date other than the beginning of the city's fiscal year. However, no changes to the council's wages may be made through the process of a budget ordinance amended following the adoption of the annual budget ordinance. So with all that said, these were areas of options that the council could review and determine what their interest was to decide on what they wanted to vote on. Or if you had any questions about the findings.
Mayor Kill, go to the council. Any council member have a question for Ms. Reed?
Mayor, Councilman Freddie Gordon here. I might suggest then that if Deborah is through, that on we could go back to the slides of I believe it was 4 possible scenarios for us there.
That's the first one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go down one, Bruce.
That's
Keep going.
good. That's it right there.
Okay.
So I'll just say this, that, this is something that I had felt that we were behind our peers in other similar communities. And it was the reason that I suggested this to the council originally, and then of course had these conversations. And so I will certainly leave it open for anybody else to make any comment that they would like. Out of these 4 recommendations, it did seem, really most logical to me to go to the 4th option here, the indexing mayor and council compensation based on the federally mandated median family income for the region. And that way it would take this conversation from having not to go forward. It would just be a raise or nothing new as that median family income were to increase. Of course, you're going to have to, I also agree that some form of lump sum modification is going to have, it would be necessary, but this indexing, and I think it's a way to get us there and to eliminate the need to have this discussion in the future.
Councilmember Franco McGee. I'm sorry.
I think it's important too to emphasize that we receive a stipend. It is not a salary, because I think sometimes when people hear salary, they think differently. And looking at these 4 different opportunities, I would prefer, I think, number 3 with the lump sum modification with future increases in line with average employee compensation. But is this just for our information now to take up later?
Councilmember Franco McGee, I think that we are looking in this to make action. I think first I want to thank Councilmember Gordon and Ms. Reed, for taking the time to actually look into this process. I was feeling the same thing, Councilmember Gordon. I felt like we were kind of behind some of our peer communities, and I felt like it's important that we, bring ourselves up to par so that we, as hard as we work, according to everybody else in different municipalities, I think it's only fair that we are, compensated in that regard. So, this is just something that needs to happen. I think that a lump sum needs to bring us up to that standard. And I agree with both of you. I don't know which one I prefer, but I do think I think we should move so that we, are brought to the standard, and then, we get the cost of living or the median family income, whichever is going to keep us moving forward along with, along with everybody else. And I guess I'm not really understanding the difference, Ms. Reed, on the difference on the median family income and how that average employee compensation increase would actually kind of differ. Could you maybe enlighten me on what the difference is in those two, please?
Well, the cost of living, or whatever the average would be for employees, is that number 3 that you're looking at?
Yes, ma'am.
Increase. That would be what the employees would normally get. So if it's 2% this year, then that might be what you all are looking at in terms of the percentage. If you're looking at the index actually shows that there is a median income. And if you look at the sample, it had 83,000. Hold on a second. It had 83,500 for 2020. So let's say we already know that $12,500 is kind of in the ballpark with all the peer groups. Then it runs about 15%. So you're actually looking at that regional annual figure as what you take your percentage off of to come up with what your salary would be. So look across where it says 12,000 at 15. If that's the percentage that the council would think that they would need. But I think that would probably fall in line with what we saw in the peer groups, and at least the 17 that it averaged out to about $12,000 for those groups that were within the same structure that the city was.
Councilmember McGee here. So you said most of our peer groups, they were using this ideology with regards to how they were increasing over the course of the years, just immediate.
Well, now this particular one is another option, but the peer groups aren't using this one. The only one that, and maybe someone else knows, but the only one that we knew that had this particular option was Charlotte, but they didn't.
No, Councilmember McGee, this is Majib Shakan. No one is using the option. It was an option that was suggested in Charlotte that they did not utilize. We put it in there because what it does is it does state that the index is then tied to the salary, the stipend is tied to the index, so that it then means that council does not make a further decision. If the MFI goes up, then there would be a corresponding increase for council in the future, so that you're not having to come back and make that decision in 2 or 3 years hence. So no one else is using the indexing. We, however, recognize it was an option for you to consider, just as going to a lump sum and then tying it to the average merit increase. It would be the average merit increase, not a COLA increase. It would be, so for example, let's say in the upcoming budget, you agree that the average employee pay increase would be a 3% average merit, hypothetically. Then what council would do is after this year, because I think the first year you would obviously take it up with a lump sum to get to a certain point. Let's say in the next year in 2021 or FY22, you would be looking at, then let's say you've already moved up with a lump sum to the 12,000 range for the council, and then there was a further 3% increase. Council would receive an average of a 3% increase based on what the employees are receiving. And the only other action, just so you know, is that I think staff, and I'll defer to the finance director and the acting manager. The issue here would be we would need some guidance at some point because it would have to be factored into the budget process that is beginning shortly. We do need from council, though, the modification of policy GA15 because the language as it was originally written does not exactly track the statute. So we would at least ask for the modification of GA15. And then, as I said, I would defer to the finance director and the manager's office in terms of at what point, if council made a decision to modify compensation, when they would want to do that so that it can be factored into for the budget. Because again, no changes can be effective except as part of the budget process.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilman Gordon here again. So am I? No, I'm not muted. Okay. You know, you could see historically that, you know, for some reasons over the years, there were just, you know, long periods where no increases were granted. And that's what got us behind our peer groups. They were, all of them were doing something on a pretty much an annualized basis, and we weren't. And that's what got us out of discrepancy here on this. And as far as the salaries and the stipends situation goes, all of these municipalities have a similar pay, a stipend and a salary. Now, in terms of my definition of those, salary is something that you get paid for the job that you do. The stipend is nothing but a way to reimburse you rather than an expense account for expenses that you have to incur to do that job. So they are different. And so, you know, that's why, honestly, we were just looking at this mainly. We're sort of in line on the stipend area, but pretty well behind, as you can see, by some large numbers, 40, 50, 60, 70% on the salary side. So there again, what we're asking for here, instead of having to discuss this every year, it's just a way going forward as to something to do to bring us up to that level, which is with our peer cities. And as Mujib has stated, to really adopt this ordinance, that's where we can sort of get this in play for a way so that it doesn't have to be discussed in the future. So either one is fine. Like, you could look back on this thing and see that if you go to that indexing, you know, your pay would not raise, for instance, this year, but something like, or the next year, it would go to, in 21, 22, it'd go to 12,713 on the 15% range. But then in the next year, it may only up your pay roughly less than $200. So, but it would go up slightly if the median income went up. So, you know, you can go along with whichever one you want to go. I think the minimum should be that we would all be lumped together with other employees and get what their increase is. But I think we do need to be brought up to this lump sum increase in the next budget, that is, to get us up to scale with our sister cities.
I agree.
Work.
Mayor Kilgore, is Councilman Gordon or any other council member prepared to make a motion, or is this something you want to look at and come back with your motion, or just what is your feelings today? We can compare to do either one.
Mayor, if I may, Mayor, in going back to Mujib's suggestion with regard to aligning with the budget, I'm looking at the schedule here, and in order to kind of incorporate this into the budget we're working on, I think some sort of decision would need to be made by February, because according to the schedule in April, we're kind of finalizing everything and there's really no changes after that time. So if we could make some decisions prior to possibly the end of February, around the February 25th deadline. And I'll defer to Lisa Strickland, our finance director, if she differs in opinion.
I was looking at the schedule as well. Yeah, if we could get the final vote at that March meeting, that would allow us to incorporate it into the budget process and have everything right in line.
Councilman McGee here.
Councilman Anthony, I'll make the motion that we take this up on our February meeting. And in the meantime, that we have an opportunity to study each of these and answer those questions we need to answer and be prepared to make a recommendation then.
Mayor Kilgore, I have a motion by Councilman Anthony. Do I have a second?
Mayor Pro Tem Holloway will second it.
Okay, I have a motion, a second. All in favor, Councilman Anthony,
Yes.
Councilman Gordon,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Holloway,
Yes.
Councilman James,
Yes.
Councilman Kazar, Councilman Kazar, Mayor Kilgore, yes. Councilman McGee,
Yes.
one more time, Councilman Kazar. He must be off.
Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem Holloway here. I think Lynn needs to unmute his mic to make that. I think this is his first Zoom meeting. And if you just hit your microphone, Lynn, and that'll make it live. So watch what you say.
Lynn, go right to the top, hit the mute button up there.
He's trying.
Anyway, Larry, yes, is that, you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah,
sir. Okay,
Oh, sorry
very
about
good.
that.
All right, everyone has voted in the, so that will pass at this time, and then we'll come back in February and talk about it. Okay, that'll put us down to item 3, Citizen Appointment Committee submittal, and I'll recognize Councilmember James.
Yes, Woman James. Good evening, everyone. I brought this before the council for us to discuss this. I know the last time we had this, had some appointees appointed. Just looking at some applications, some information that was on it, didn't line up with the committee that they was applying for. Stuff was marked out. So we got to do a better job of how this process is done. So we need to relook at how the applications are received, just the process in all, and what we're doing and how things need to be handled. Because currently, how it's handled is just not consistent in what we're doing. So we need to make the citizens feel welcome if they apply for committees and things of that nature. So.
Councilman McGee here. I wanted to add as well. I think we need to get a policy in place for this process to assure that we are acting in the best way with regards to transparency and ethically when it comes to allowing people to serve on city boards and commissions for the city, so that we can make sure that there's some biases that are in place, or strictly contingent upon the ability to serve, if they're qualified, and things of that nature. So I think it's important that we make sure that we look at the submittal process, the application process, so that everybody has a fair chance to serve if need be.
And this Councilwoman James, just to make it clear, like I know Majid talked about last time, so you can serve on 2 committees, from my understanding. That's correct, Majid?
That is correct. I understand that at a recent meeting, the chair of the committee expressed a preference. However, there is no requirement in your policy GA05 that does anything further than what the constitutional provision is. So someone can serve on a maximum of 2 committees, boards, or commissions.
Okay.
Councilwoman
Unless council or
Anthony.
the committee makes a different decision, and that is entirely up to you as the committee that would be responsible for making the recommendations to council, or council's responsibility if it makes a decision.
Mayor Pro Tem Holloway here. I want to thank Angela and Franco for bringing this up. I think it's a topic we need to look at. And at our March meeting, I would like for Freddie and saluted along with myself to take a look at the application itself, the process we used to go through it, and see if we can't come up with some ways to improve the process. And we'll report back to council maybe at our April meeting and give you an update on what we've come up with.
Councilwoman Anthony, I agree that we need to take another look at the process and try to improve it where we can. And I never want a citizen to feel that anything improper has been done. I know it hasn't been on my part. And maybe the process from when the application comes in till the time that it gets to us, because we trust that when we get the application that everything is above par and we go with just extra application from what we actually get in hand. And when we get the application, the qualifications of the criteria of having attended 2 meetings, all of that is supposed to be taken care of before we get it. When we get it, we should be ready to work with it from there. And I do believe in 100% transparency.
Councilman McGee, I totally agree. And I would like to, if at all possible, we can come up with some of those terms now. I feel like there shouldn't be under any circumstances where applications are modified by our staff. I feel like, just like Councilwoman Anthony is saying, if they do not fit the criteria, then they shouldn't be applicable to apply for that particular board. If there's, for instance, if you're applying for Parks and Rec and nothing on your application, is about Parks and Rec, then your application shouldn't be applicable to even be entered for that process. And so, I think that's something that we need to look at so that everybody understands, even if it's on the application itself, it needs to read, that your experiences, your skills or whatever reflect that of the board that you are applying for. And that way it's crystal clear when people are applying, what boards they can apply for. You just can't say, oh, okay, I work at this such a place and I want to be on a committee that doesn't even have anything to do with the committee that you're applying for. And I feel like we've allowed that in the past, and that's what's caused confusion from our taxpayers, because they don't understand why, I may have, experience in this and this other person doesn't, but yet and still they're getting an opportunity to serve on this committee and the other person is not. And so,
Mayor, if I might, first, I appreciate Councilmember McGee's point. I would note from a procedural standpoint, Mayor Pro Tem Holloway has a motion on the floor, and and he would have to agree to any amendments to that motion. That motion, however, does need to be seconded, and I would ask the maker of the motion to please clarify the motion. That when you mentioned the March meeting, I think did you mean the March meeting of the Citizens Appointment Committee as opposed to council, and then bringing it back to council in April?
Mayor Pro Tem Holloway, thank you. Yes, I was talking about the March meeting of the Citizens Appointment Committee, and I would request any council person to email all 3 of us with other ideas you've got that would streamline it, make things better. Send it to all 3 of us, and then at March we'll go over all those plus our own ideas on that.
Thank you,
And
Mayor Pro Tem Holloway. And Mayor, this is Mujib. We do need a second for that motion if there is.
Councilwoman James seconded.
All right.
Councilwoman Anthony, question. Okay, if I have it, could I amend the motion?
Sure.
This is Mujib Shakan. No, ma'am. You can ask to amend the motion, but that will be up to the maker of the motion to allow the friendly amendment.
Okay, so Councilwoman Anthony, Councilmember
making a substitute motion, and you could do that, but you would need a second for a substitute motion.
Okay, Councilwoman Anthony, I'd like to make a substitute motion. In agreement with the first motion, I would like to, in our February meeting, include all of council in looking at the procedure. And the reason I say that is because from time to time, each of us may serve on that committee. So I think we all may have some valuable insights as to what the procedure is. And then and once it's approved by council, it has to come back to council anyway. Then we can institute that in our March citizens appointment meeting.
Mayor Kilgore, I have a motion from Mayor Pro Tem McGee, and I have a
So you
substitute.
have it from, this is Mujib, you have it from Mayor Pro Tem Holloway,
I mean,
seconded by Councilmember
I'm
Jones.
losing you.
Yeah, which do I take first?
It's actually, there's only one motion on the floor, Mayor. It is Mayor
need a
Pro
second.
Tem Holloway's motion. If Councilmember Anthony wishes to ask to amend the motion, that is up to the maker of the motion. If Mayor Pro Tem Holloway does not wish to allow the amendment to the motion, Councilmember Anthony may make a substitute motion, which I believe the substitute motion she has made is instead to bring the item back to council in February, although which is inconsistent though with the, I think, original motion was to have the committee consider it in March,
Okay.
but it is up to, however, if Councilmember Anthony wishes to make a substitute motion or request an amendment, that is entirely proper. So it depends on how the original maker of the motion would receive any amendment, or if Councilmember Anthony would like to make a substitute motion.
Okay, Councilwoman Anthony, I'm gonna withdraw my motion and ask Mayor Pro Tem Holloway if he would consider amending his motion to include what I was gonna put in the substitute motion, which was to include the entire council in the process with the rationale that each of us at one time or another will probably serve on that committee. And so as far as the process, we all need to have a thorough understanding of that, and in making it so all of us can approve it. It will have to come back to council anyway, once those changes have been made.
Mayor Pro Tem Holloway, I'm sorry, my iPad's fading in and out, so I hope you can hear me okay. Sort of what I was thinking was, since this is your committee, you're the chairperson of it, that any recommendations should come from council. That was mainly.
Breaking out
And I
bad.
thought
Yeah.
I believe this is Rajiv Shakan. I believe what
Our
he was
committee.
saying, Councilmember Anthony, was as the committee that would make the recommendation to council,
sorry.
your committee, it would be appropriate for it to go to your committee first, then come back to council in April. At that time, then all of council can have had input, because I think what he has asked for in the motion is that all of council provide input to the three of you on the committee before your March meeting. So I think what you're asking for is actually in his motion.
All right, Mayor Kilgore.
Okay, well then Councilwoman Anthony, I would request that all members of council take time to read what their present process is, so they can make educated suggestions as to what we change in it, or what we propose to change in it.
Mayor, this is Mujib once again. So I think it's clear from a procedural standpoint, you've got a motion that's been seconded. There are no amendments, no substitute motions. I would note one other thing. Councilmember McGee had suggested that a question about how the applications are treated. I would note that this is the process that the committee has not had a problem with over the years. And I don't think Councilmember McGee meant to suggest that staff was altering documents. It was, if any alterations that have taken place in the applications have been at the request of the applicants. It is not that staff revises them because they wish to. Staff's role is to, if a applicant says, I would prefer to be considered for a different committee, that would be what occurs. But I think, but that's again, a part of a process where if you wish to have members who wish to change a committee they're interested into, that's something you can discuss as part of the process that the committee as well as the council will be looking at.
Councilmember McGee here, that you're correct. And I'm saying if an applicant does request that, I feel like we should tell them no and to reapply for the appropriate board or commission that they wish to serve on. So you're right. I know that our staff is not doing anything that is unethical. However, we need to make sure that the applicants understand what the process is and that they cannot alter an application that they need to resubmit for additional boards or commissions if that's what they wish to do.
Councilmember McGee, this is Mujib Shakan. Staff appreciates your clarification because I know our team that works on this in the clerk's office works incredibly hard. And I wanted to make, I don't think anyone wanted to suggest that they were doing anything improper. And I know that was not at all what you intended. So thank you for
Absolutely.
clarifying that.
You know, you bet. And Councilmember McGee here, I tell Sherry and Bridget, I appreciate them daily. I let them know that they're much appreciated. I know they work extremely hard and they do an extremely great job. And, you know, I tell them that often. I know I ask of them a lot, you know, and so I celebrate them all the time. And I want to assure that they understand that it was nothing against them. It is more so that the applicants understand what our process is. And so since we didn't have really anything in the policy, you know, they were just doing their jobs according to what was allowed and what our policy is. And so that's why I think it's extremely important that we put a policy in place so everybody can be on the same page. You know, everybody can know what the process is, and therefore there's no questions about us doing our jobs in the most ethical manner.
Mayor Kilgore, I have a motion, and who seconded the motion?
Councilmember
James.
James did, Mayor.
I'm sorry.
Councilmember James did, Mayor.
All right, I have a motion and a second. All in favor, Councilman Anthony,
Yes, Councilwoman Anthony, yes.
Councilman Gordon,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Holloway,
Yes.
Councilman James,
Yes.
Councilman Kazire,
Yes.
Councilman Mayor Kilgore, yes, and Councilman McGee.
Yes.
Okay, that will pass. So that will go to the committee, and the committee will come back to the council with some recommendations.
Mayor, are you there? This is Mujib. They've lost the mayor, even though he is in the area with the most reliable Wi-Fi in the building.
Ground control to Major Tom.
Councilman Gordon here. Mayor, we're waiting for your direction.
I believe the mayor would want you to go to the open conversation on races and committee update, but we'll wait for the mayor to return. If everyone would take a moment, we'll try to text him and see what's going on. Council, this is Mujib Shakan. I just asked him if he had gotten disconnected. I think if he's working off the iPad, the mayor is rejoining now, is what we've been told. Yeah, he was disconnected and he should be coming on shortly. And council, from a staff perspective, we think you guys are handling a full Zoom very well. And I hope that all of you have been able to hear each other, because I think from our perspective, we're able to hear all of you well.
Councilman Gordon here, and yes, it is better. The hearing is much better in this session.
This is Councilwoman James. Can't Pro Tem Holloway speak up in the absence of the mayor?
He actually, this is Mujib Shakan. Yes, if we don't have the mayor back, and I'll defer to Bruce, because Bruce, I think, may have to admit him as a panelist. But if, hold on a second, I'm seeing, there's the mayor. All right, well, Marion's big shot just disappeared. So, Mayor, when you're back and unmuted, it's all yours again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, it just went down. I don't know what, I didn't touch a button, so I didn't zoom up anywhere. I'm still here, but I don't know what happened, but I apologize for that. So I went to item 4, open conversation racism committee update, and I'm recognizing Councilmember Anthony.
Okay, Councilwoman Anthony, as chair of the open conversation on racism, I'm going to provide the council with the recommendation from the committee from our December 10th meeting, and I will follow that with a recommendation. We last met on December 10th. That was the second of the 3 meetings that we're authorized to have. And from this open communication on racism, public webinar, the motion was made and second that the open conversation on racism committee recommend to the council to form a DEI committee. That stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'll give you little specifics about that so it will be pretty clear. That makeup would include participants from the community, the city, and the county, and would discuss issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. When we first authorized the committee, one of our goals were that we'd be able to hand it off from moving it from discussion to a plan of action. And this is the first plan that we have come up with. So at this time, I make a motion that we form DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion committee, and that it be a mayoral committee. And that's a recommendation from the Committee on Racism.
Councilmember Anthony, this is Mujib Shakan.
Yes.
I would note that the motion goes beyond council's authority in that under your code, only the mayor can create mayoral committees. So therefore, any motion to request that the mayor create a mayoral committee is beyond the scope of authority of the council.
Okay, well,
McGee here.
about, I'm sorry, go
okay.
ahead.
Well, the recommendation came from the committee. I don't know how to present it otherwise. I'll just give you the recommendation. It will be up to the mayor how he wants to handle it. Would that be correct?
I don't see a point for a mayoral committee. We got mayoral committees. If the council wants to do a committee of some type, we talking about the county. You said something about including the county, which is fine. And at some point, if Mujib can chime in a little bit if he wants to, at some point, if we can bring the county in or whatever, I don't know how we incorporate that. Not that we can't, but if we do that, I'm sure they're going to have to make some kind of record. But as far as a mayoral committee and point 2 or 3 council members and 7 or 8 or 9 citizens, I don't see a point for a mayoral committee. If the council wants a committee, I think that's up to the council. But McGee, have you got any comment on the county part?
I think, Mayor, I think you meant me as opposed to
Mujib, I'm sorry.
Although Councilmember McGee and I can take this on the road, it could be the Mujib and McGee show if we want to do that. It might be entertaining. With respect to the county, it's the issue I think would be having rewatched the committee meeting. The question is if you're going to include this as diversity, equity, inclusion in the city and the county, you may wish to pull in the county. So the question is, does the committee then wish to, or does the council wish to work with the county on creating a joint committee? Also, the question is, having again looked at the video again, it seemed perhaps a bit vague as to the purpose of the committee. And it may be appropriate because there are 2 issues now. I think one is obviously if you want to have the county's diversity, equity, and inclusion considered, it may be appropriate to discuss this with the county as well. Would it be appropriate to go back to the conversation, the members of the conversation or the members of the committee that have set this up for the council for the city to determine the scope of what would happen and then the timing of it as well? Because the question we would, I would note then is you potentially have something that's unlimited in scope and in time. So how would you as a council want that to be resolved? Would you want it to be resolved as in a defined scope of activities over a defined period of time? Would it then be a joint committee with the county? then we can then ask the county to work with us and create a group that would do that, or how. But those are questions that come up. But obviously, as the mayor had pointed out, if council wishes to create a committee, council may create a committee, and then we would just ask that the council then decide some of the scope and timing issues so that it could move forward. And we recognize the committee, the conversation, the members of the conversation have very good intentions in terms of what it wishes to move forward on. But as you know, we would need some definition, and perhaps they can help provide it for us at their third conversation, which I believe is coming up shortly, but I'll defer to the chair of that committee, Councilmember Anthony.
Okay, Councilwoman Anthony, rationale in inviting county is because before we were limited with people who lived inside the city limits. We had to turn away many people who lived outside the city limits. And so that was broadening the scope. And it was thought that this committee would meet quarterly. And we did not define a time limit on it. But if the council likes, we can take it back to the committee for further clarification.
Mayor Kilgore, yeah, the council, Mayor Kilgore, I'm sorry, go ahead with your input.
Mayor Freddie Gordon here. I believe it was brought up recently, either through the manager or the attorney, that we do have, and it was a diversity roundtable that was started a number of years ago that met annually. Now, I don't know if that's an ongoing thing or not, or could this be rolled over into something like that? We do have a diversity committee of our department heads, I believe, which meets regularly. So with this diversity roundtable thing, it really, if you just wanted to get into that, but would be a possible way of rolling this into that group. But the point is, I think, and what we all are trying to seek here is somewhat of a broader scope of people. It could be NAACP, it could be Chamber of Commerce, it could be County Commission, it could be anything, but really to make this thing move forward and to have some teeth, if you will. I think the thought was that we really needed to bring some broader, bigger groups into this thing. And so I don't necessarily know that it would be imperative on us to make a decision right now as to whether we wanted to create another mayoral committee or not.
Councilwoman Anthony, I think the biggest question here, or the biggest obstacle, is whether or not it would be a mayoral committee. It seems that that's the biggest objection. But in order to move forward, I don't think that the roundtable would be the appropriate vehicle. First of all, it's once a year, and that's more or less, you invite some community people in, and you have representatives from the city. So what we were trying to do, work with citizenship rather than just staff. And we were trying to understand racism and trying to become anti-racist. And we knew that diversity, which is looking at the differences in people and all of the protective characteristics of that, equity, looking at the equality, and inclusion, meaning that no one's left behind and everybody is respected and feels like they have a part. So I think it is an important group. And I think if we're going to work toward addressing those issues, it's important, even though it may not be a mayoral committee. We all see the state of our country. We all know that it's real. And I don't think we can take a blind eye, but I think we need to go ahead and work toward unification. And that is the vehicle for which we can work to those goals.
Mayor Kilgore, Councilman Anthony, and I don't know all about these other two. The round table you speaking of once a year, and there was another committee that Councilman Gordon spoke about. Are there either one of these committees that we could take and modify it and keep it in one of those course, I know we don't want to meet once a year. I understand that. That's why I use the word modify. Is it one of these committees we can add to this and make it that? And what did you have planned? Monthly or quarterly meeting?
We were talking about quarterly. As you all know, the Conversation on Racism Committee has one more meeting. And so after that meeting, that goes away. And from the beginning, we have a goal of working towards a working plan. And that was the first recommendation that came out of the committee.
Okay. If any council member, and you, Councilman Anthony, if you know, the two they talked about, the round table and the other one Councilman Gordon spoke of. And I'm throwing this out because I don't know. It's one of those committees that we could modify and make this that committee and put it on a quarterly basis. Of course, I'm not for the yearly one, and I want you to understand that. I think it's a good idea. But if it's one of those, and if it would work, I think that'd be a good way to go. I'm just throwing that out for conversation.
Okay, well, Councilwoman Anthony, the roundtable, the Human Resources Department, I think they have a lot on their plate. I would want to settle them with that responsibility. Because if there is a DEI committee, it could be that a citizen could be chairing it, or someone, perhaps this is hypothetical, from another community organization. But I would not dare want to settle human resources with that responsibility. Okay,
Mayor Kilgore, yes, now that you've explained, I understand. I knew it was something like that way, and I agree with you on that. I didn't know. How about the other? What is that other committee that Councilman Gordon was talking about? Are you familiar with it? I know about it, but I don't know the inner operations of it.
Yeah. Mayor Freddie Gordon here again. I believe that is a that's a committee set up really internally
it
for
is
department of that work, our department heads to
Yes.
be involved in with diversity, and could be and I don't know if we want to start, because if you got the department heads, and then I don't think that might not be the way to go on this.
No.
That's going to be involving them more of their time, bringing them into the internal workings of the city. This was thought to be, I'm sure, Councilwoman Anthony would say this is outside the scope of just the internal workings of the city.
Freddie, if I may, the diversity committee you're referring to is actually looking at our internal, our city workforce, and ensuring that we are trying to diversify and make that here within the city employee, within our workforce. So this committee is a little different. The one that Saluda is talking about, I think, is broader, more community, county-wide, to look at the diversity, equity, and inclusion aspects at a broader scale than just internally at the city workforce.
And can I say something? This is Deborah Chestnut Reed. On the issue with the roundtable, that was just I guess a tool to help, from an internal standpoint, help our citizens that have come through certain programs to break down the walls of the city so that they know who to contact. They know how the city operates. So it's a different focus than the DEI, which is a lot broader and requires a lot more time to implement. So just want to share that as still part of the internal.
Right. Mayor Kilgore, what is the council's what is their perspective on another committee?
Councilmember McGee here. I think the committee is definitely needed. I would like to go forward with the mayoral committee if that's what the Open Conversation on Racism Committee has proposed for us to do. I mean, they have been meeting the last few months and having these discussions and trying to figure out how we can move forward as a city and as a community. We did invest money and time and effort by putting these people together to make these recommendations. I think it's only right that we try to see to what the recommendations are and move forward in that regard, and go ahead and inform the DEI committee based on the recommendation from the chair, Councilwoman Anthony.
Okay. Any other, Mayor Kilgore, any other council member have any input? Okay. Attorney Majid,
Mayor, this is Majid.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
The council don't need to vote on, I understand that, but I'm going to be sure I'm right. Council don't need to vote on the mayoral committee, right?
Council actually does not have the ability to vote on a mayoral committee.
That's my,
The only person that can set a mayoral committee up would be you.
okay.
The council may set up a committee on its own by a vote, but they cannot require a mayoral committee to be formed.
That was my understanding. I wanted to be sure that I did move in the right direction. Council Lady Anthony made the motion. We don't have to vote on that. I just do it. I either do it or don't do it. Is that correct?
Mayor, I think there was a motion that was made. I don't believe it was seconded.
I know, but we do need to vote on that. Is that correct?
If it is seconded, if it doesn't have a second yet, it needs to get a second.
Okay. And my question is, if it gets a second, then I can meet with Ms. Anthony and talk about it. Is that correct?
Well, Mayor, I think if it has a second, then it's either council votes on it or tables it. And it depends on what council wishes to do.
What was the initial motion?
The initial motion was there'll be a mayoral committee on DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion, that would be made up of citizens that could include people from the county as well. We work on the issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that they would meet quarterly to review those three issues within the city and county.
I'll second that motion.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, let me call the roll. All in favor, Council Lady Anthony.
Councilman Anthony, yes.
Don't be laughing at me. Councilman Gordon. Councilman Gordon.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Holloway.
Yes, sir.
Councilman James.
Yes.
Councilman Kazire.
Yes.
Mayor Kilgore, yes. McGee. Councilman McGee.
Yes.
And Councilman Kazire, you did say yes, sir.
Yes, I did. Can you not hear me?
Yeah, I did that time. I wasn't sure, but I thought that's what you said. Just double check it. Okay, that will pass. And Ms. Anthony, you and I maybe can talk about this a little further. I'm going to bring this up. We've got one more item, item 5, and it's going to take a little bit of time. If my time is correct, it's 5:45. We're going to run out of time, in my opinion, on 5. So if it's all right with the council, we'll take our break, come back at 6 and take up item 5 and move into the regular agenda. What's the wishes of the council?
Yes.
Good idea.
Okay.
Gordon, Freddie Gordon here. Yeah. What exactly was that 5th item? I'm drawing a blank.
5th item is it's the city legislative agenda.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's going to take just a little bit of time.
And Mayor, if I might, this is Majib Shakan. The main issue is that the time consuming part of it's going to be, it's two things. One, you have to select a delegate to vote on the league's goals, and then narrow the 17 goals from the league down to 10. Now, if you want to discuss that further, obviously you could do that after the break, or there's potentially a way to shortcut that if you want, but it's up to y'all what you wish to do.
Well, I don't mind continuing on, but I just was thinking some of them may need a 5-minute break, and I've got about 14 minutes till now, and I'm opinion it's going to take 10 or 15 minutes on this. What do you think?
Mayor, I think you're fine with taking that break. I think everyone could probably do with a break because you've been at this now for an hour and 45 minutes. So my recommendation would be that you go ahead and adjourn this meeting, and then you call everything back to order at 6 o'clock, and then you move item 5 to be the first item to consider at 6.
Yeah, Mayor Kilgore, that was my thinking. Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So move. Councilman Anthony, so move.
Councilwoman James seconded.
I have a motion and a second. All right, Councilman Anthony,
Yes.
Councilman Gordon,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem,
Yes.
Councilman James,
Yes.
Azar,
Yes.
Mayor Kilgore, yes. Councilman McGee.
Yes.
Okay, we'll stand down and be back on at 6 o'clock. I'll cut you back on at 6 o'clock sharp, and we'll take item 5 up and move into the regular agenda. Thank you.